so on. A forgery is what we should be talking about. So hopefully that's it. Got it. It's recorded. Brilliant. Okay, so first things first, it would be nice to know if you have got any news for us this week, Goff.
No, nothing. No, I haven't got anything.
Okay, that's fair enough. And what about you, my learned friend Henry? You've got to tell us something other than the fact that don't be in a place and go under the table and put a drink on the table and then you knock it and the drink goes everywhere.
You need to go to the pub more often.
What's that?
Don't worry. I think the one thing that caught my eye was obviously the solar disk, the Neolithic solar disk. I think it's from Germany.
Yeah. Is this the gold one?
It's green with bronze pieces in it to identify the stars.
Yes. What are they saying about that now? Because that does come every now and again, doesn't it?
It's part of there's an exhibition at the British Museum which I haven't been able to get in to see much, or nothing actually, because of their website. So they've got over 400 items, I understand, they're displaying, such as the chalk drum, which was found with the bodies of the 3 children.
Yes. Yeah. So what about going to the British Museum anyway and actually seeing them all in the flesh?
Well, that means you've got to go to London.
There is that downside. I've got to be honest with you. You go into London these days is a bit all over the place, isn't it? You can't exactly drive down there because of parking things, which can be a bit of a nightmare. So, how are the prehistoric items that you're talking about? Which one? You mentioned the solar disc and the drum. Which is the one that you really want to see if it's neither of those?
I think the solar disk I find most intriguing because it shows how far advanced they are on observing stars.
What we're going to do? We're going to type this in. So solar disk, not solar panel. Solar disk. Is it definitely Neolithic or is it Bronze Age?
It's meant to be 5,000 years old.
Definitely Neolithic then. Neolithic. The Nebra sky disk. Is that it?
Yeah, I think so. Yes. Or 3,600 years old.
Okay, let's just do a bit of screen. To be honest with you, there's talk that this isn't genuine, but that's something else. So we're going to share this now. Let's go to. Oh, that's well worth it, isn't it? That's basically what you were talking about.
Yeah, that's right.
So what really interests you about the Nebra disc? And sort of, I know you. What does that look like to you? Is it a representation of the heavens? What is it?
I think they've identified star constellations from it.
Yeah.
Which then obviously shows how advanced, if that is the case, people were in observing the sky at night at that time.
Yeah. Is that the thing that? But when you do look at that, you actually see that you've got a representation of a moon, and you've obviously got the representation of the sun. You know, that is definitely catchy. And what else is there? What else is there? What are those sort of lines on there then? What would they represent? Because you got the one on the right and you've got the one at the bottom.
Yeah.
It looks like does look like a smiley face, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't know, but I think the various stud marks are meant to depict stars.
And would the constellations have actually changed in that time?
Well, obviously things would have changed. So somehow someone would have, if they're going to work it out, they're going to have to mathematically work out going backwards where things would have been.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on that. So we're going to go on to Paviland now. And thanks for that about the Nebra disc. Maybe you can actually see it yourself sometime. And we've got the Wikipedia thing on here, and it just basically says about being a bronze disc, as you've mentioned, 30 centimeters in diameter. That's the length of the ruler, actually. That's pretty big. A weight of 2.2 kilograms in weight, which is quite amazing. A green hue, a green patina on it, which is and inlaid with gold symbols. Absolutely amazing. And so let's go to where we want to be today, and where we want to be is Paviland Cave. Now we've had a little bit of a delay today, simply because I don't know. I put on the computer today. I thought everything's there, and it wasn't. So one thing I will say about the Paviland Cave is it takes me the story and the history and the archaeology and where we are with the Paviland Cave and what we understand with the Paviland Cave, the archaeology, other expert opinions, its meaning to prehistory, the Paleolithic period. There's all that into it. It's at the hinge point of allowing us to understand what archaeology is about, except very few people have gone the other way. And very few people have ever questioned the authenticity of the archaeology, or brackets, close brackets, at Paviland Cave. And when we're saying the archaeology, is it genuine archaeology that was discovered at Paviland Cave by Reverend Buckland and the Talbot sisters, and accompanied by a chap by the name of Dilwyn Rees, right? And it was one of those things today. As you know, I'm referring to him as Dilwyn Rees. It's Lewis Weston Dilwyn, and I was a little bit obsessed today with the fact that I needed this document in front of me. I've never been like that before. I can usually put off a lecture without any notes in front of me, as you guys have experienced. And, you know, I can just do it because I've already done this once and I've done this twice. In fact, I've looked at the Paviland Cave in the context of investigation, research, presentation quite a number of times. But I needed these diaries. I needed the text in front of me to give authenticity to where we go today. And where I stand with the Paviland Cave is it's a forgery. Where I stand with the Paviland Cave, and I'll set my stall in front of us now, is that the artifacts have been removed from other caves and assembled in this cave to make it look like the remains come from this cave, and to basically in the cave there's an assemblage of Roman medieval pottery. There's an assemblage of this type of prehistoric stuff, that type of prehistoric stuff. In fact, there's so much stuff in the cave that it's like an Aladdin's cave of archaeology. But there's key problems with looking at the authenticity of the find. Now, again, when I did this on Tuesday, 10 people agreed with me about what I was saying, but the one thing they disagreed with me was calling it the Paviland Cave fake, right? And the reason why that is because, Karl, you've just told us all the artifacts are genuine, but they've come from somewhere else. If the artifacts are genuine, how are they fake? It might be a forged assemblage of material that's come from elsewhere, but certainly the artifacts are genuine. And I said, okay, that's a fair point. So we call it the Paviland Cave forgery. We don't put it on the same par as Piltdown Man forgery, but the Piltdown Man forgery is made up of genuine artifacts that are not very old in regards to something that should be 500,000 years old. But when you look at the three assemblages of bone associated with the Piltdown Man forgery from 1912, again, it's a forgery. It's been assembled somewhere, and this is this, and that's why this has got a similarity to do with Paviland Cave. The difference is with Paviland Cave is that the artifacts are actually the age that we say they are, rather than the Piltdown Man forgery. Dates are completely wrong. So that's another difference. I have been down to Paviland Cave. I've never been in it, but I've actually been down to the place of Paviland Cave, and I couldn't get into it. And I start off with fact one. And the fact one is this image. And what we need to do, we need to look at this, and we need to go, and we need to go, and we need to go, we need to go like this, and we need to see something interesting on the rock. Now that's the entranceway, the one in front of us, that one there, that's the entranceway to Paviland Cave. Also, there's a blowhole in the roof, and that blowhole in the roof has been created since the water has permeated around this part of the coastline. Now, back in the day, as we will see from my notes, what we will do, we will start off with the explanationary notes for Paviland Cave, right? And those notes fall into the trap of bearing out what I'm saying, right? And I did say on Tuesday, I kept repeating for it, the lecture on Tuesday went on for a good 2 hours. We won't do the same now because we're going to get more to the point. On Tuesday, I kept saying to everybody, does it sound like I'm lecturing you? Does it sound like I'm trying to prove a point? And everybody said no. They said, actually, what you're saying actually makes sense. So the fact that I haven't given to you, I'm prevaricating too much. The fact that I haven't given you is that if you look at the top of that grey line there in the rock, that's rock borne algae that needs salt and saline conditions to survive. And that laps the base of that cave entrance. Fact two, the other fact as well is there's a blowhole. Blowholes are created when water is forced into a rock and the water has to go somewhere. So the water makes its way through the rock and out of the roof of the rock, right? And there is a blowhole on top of the rock. We'll see a plan in a short while, right? So that means that water was in that cave under such pressure, which would then mean that any artifacts in there that have existed from Paleolithic times, as soon as the water starts to go in there, all those artifacts will be ripped out and destroyed and washed away forever. Now, I needed the Dilwyn stop calling it that. I needed the Dilwyn diaries in front of me. I needed the Lewis Western diaries. I needed them because Dilwyn gives us an account of what's going on in the cave the days that the artifacts were found. So that's fact. That's keeping in with it. Fact three is that the original discovery was not made by Dilwyn and was certainly not made by the very eminent Reverend Buckland. The original find was actually made by the Talbot sisters. So that's fact three. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to spool something else in front of you again. The bones. These bones. Now, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to chuck a fact at you because this comes out in the reading, right? And the fact is in front of me. Now, if you look, you can basically see a big chunk of the left-hand side of the body, right? And assumed other little bits, but nothing much to talk home about, right? But you can see the left-hand side of the body, but nothing of the right-hand side of the body was found, right? Other than the fibula and the tibia at the bottom hand side of the right-hand side. Did I get that right? Yeah, all of the left-hand side, I've mixed this up. All the left-hand side is visible there, and only a tiny bit of the right-hand side was ever discovered, right? And the point is, I was thinking, I remember I had that moment last night when I sat down and I said, well, if there were other bones that are contemporary with that cave, there would be bits found, like other bits of rib bone, or other bits of pelvic bone, or other bits of the very big right hand humerus that would have been found. There would bits of the right hand side of the body would have been found in all the mixed up stuff in the cave. Nothing like that has been found. So that is another clue 4 to fact 4 to understanding that the body may have been moved from another cave, and this is the point. And why was it moved from another cave? Another fact as well. I don't know where we're on with our facts, but another fact as well is that the material was probably organized in that cave because people could get access to it, and it seemed to make sense. And the material was probably taken to a cave that they shouldn't have been in, and all these other things. There's such a jumble of artifacts in there. It's like an antiques roadshow of history and archaeology. Even a mammoth skull. But we'll talk about the mammoth skull in a short while. So what I want us to do, I want to sprawl out what one entry on the internet tells us, not what I'm saying, but what they're saying, which is really, really important. So here we go. Let's fact check. The Red Lady of Paviland Cave. Fact, that's another fact. Are we on fact 6? The Red Lady of Paviland Cave is not a female, but is in fact a male, right? That was found out years later, and it's still called the Red Lady of Paviland, when in fact it's a man, right? So that's that fact check. That's another fact is wrong. Fact 6. So it's from the Upper Paleolithic period. Yes. Partial skeletal remains. Yes. Male died in red ochre. Yes. Buried somewhere in around 33 years BP. We can agree with all that. Except maybe the ochre bit's a bit of a red herring, right? Lots of the bones are not, it says that every single one of the bones was stained with red ochre at Paviland Cave. But there's one little fact with this, is when you look at the bones at Paviland Cave, they are clearly stained, right? Let me show you an image. There's another thing wrong with this illustration as well, and we'll go back to the other bit, and we'll go back onto that now. A lot to go through. So if you're looking at the reconstruction, this is the reconstruction that they used in the National Museum of Wales, which is absolutely so categorically wrong, it's unbelievable. Fact check on this, fact 7. If the red ochre permeates that much into the bone, it would mean that the bones would have to have been defleshed in the first place for the red ochre to have stained the bone to such the degree that you see it today. Therefore, that means that the bones would have been defleshed. The other fact as well is, with that being said, the other artifacts, instead of being permeatingly stained with red ochre, like the periwinkle shells, like the wands, right? They're sort of more coated, you know, sort of. It's not actually permeated into the structure, right? So that means that the only way that the red ochre could have actually stained the bones is that the body had been defleshed, and therefore this illustration is completely wrong. And what is also wrong is the light behind, right? So what we need to do, we need to forget the blooming fact check in a minute, right? Let's actually go back to that illustration. And by the way, oh, hang on. Where did my little illustration go there? So there it is. Paviland Cave near Port Island. And you can actually see Longhole Cave there as well. Nothing about Longhole Cave this week. And the simple reason why we're not doing Longhole Cave and Toothhole Cave and Cathole Cave and and all the Hyena Cave and all the rest of it, because we're going to be looking at the other caves on the Gower. And I will tell you where I believe that the bones and lots of the other artifacts may have come from, that were actually placed as into Paviland Cave in the first place. So what I need to do now, I've just got a bit distracted, right? Back to this illustration. You see that? That itself, the location of the cave itself was 70 miles away from the sea back in the day. Most of my fact checks tell me that, right? My fact checking tell me that. We'll do that in a moment. Now, one of the things as well, if you go there, you're looking into the cave, right? So what we need to do, we need to go back to the reconstruction. Now, this was done by somebody who was able to illustrate. It's a fine illustration, but that's wrong. Everything about it is wrong. The clothing's wrong, the way it's buried. And if that was buried in that way, all you'd need is a hyena in that cave, and it would have just taken everything away, right? Oh, maybe it wouldn't have taken everything away. And the reason why it wouldn't have taken everything away, because it was defleshed, but we've already discussed that. Now, there's no discussion in this. I'm just giving you a lecture. But however, that there, this would have been set much further back in the cave originally, because it's been eroded away by Mr. C. There he is. Now the cave, that's Carboniferous limestone, so it's likely that the remains in the cave, I'm saying that they've been brought from somewhere else. If there had been remains in the cave, they would be much further back in the cave, right? As water has been inundating the landscape, particularly over the past 4,000 or 5,000 years, since the loss of Doggerland 8,500 years ago. And obviously that's on the east coast, but we've got the same problem here, water level rising, and the loss 1,000 years after that, about 7,500 years with Ireland. Slowly as the water is breaking away the coastline. But as we know, if we look, if there were any artifacts in there, right, they would have been lost by the actions of a blowhole, right? So, and you can actually see that the archaeology is rather sloping, right? So water level rising, storm, you mentioned storms earlier on, water in there smashes anything away, and then obviously that blowhole there, that gap in the rock there, where actually people do actually climb down into the cave, you know, that's more evidence to say that the artifacts have been placed into that cave at Paviland, probably a few months before William Buckland was made aware of this cave. And also, strangely enough, William Buckland printed his best-selling book in 1823. A few months later after this discovery, which he put into the book to actually prove some of the stuff he was saying. So what we're trying to say there, before the artifacts were found, he was saying things that weren't backed up. After the artifacts were found, it backed up some of the stuff he was saying in his publication, which we'll come on to. Right, so so more facts. We know it's a Carboniferous limestone cave. It was originally known as Goathole Cave, known as Paviland Cave. It was purportedly discovered by William Buckland. Fact 8, that's wrong. It was not originally discovered by him, but he had all the glory. It was originally thought that it was the remains of a Roman era female, and the reason why that is because the artifacts were mixed up with Roman pottery and Roman coins, particularly one from the Roman Emperor Carausius, which can be dated to about 290 years AD, right? So that's very odd. Why is there all this Roman stuff in there as well? It's just really strange. And that actually, what I'm going to say is there was an episode of Time Team, and it turned out to be a forgery in West Wales. what it was that they called in time team, and there was a folly in the garden, right? And they said, oh, look, this is medieval. And the archaeologist got there and said, no, it's not. And then basically we're digging there, and the guy said, oh, look, I found a sword. And they went to the place where they found the sword, and he said it was lying there. And they dug a bit further down, and there was barbed wire. And they discovered that this sword that had been found, it's probably dated from about 900 years AD, must have come from somewhere else. That's what we're talking about. And there was a reason for that, and we don't know. Right? Maybe because the guy wanted to get on TV. There's lots of other easier ways to get onto TV. Just streak through the streets of Barry and it'd get on there easily. You know, right, cracking on. You like me mentioning Barry all the time, don't you? So Goat Hole would have probably been occupied in the prehistoric period, but because of the damage by the sea, we would have lost all that evidence anyway. And actually Dilwyn tells us exactly what's going on. So what I'm going to do is have a little bit more of a read of the stuff in front of me, and then we're gonna take the whole thing apart. So originally Daniel Davis and Reverend John Davis found bones in the cave, including a tusk of a mammoth, right? Interesting stuff. The Talbot family of Penrhys, or Penrice Castle, that I'm told I've got to pronounce it because Penrhys is on the valley, Penrice is on the Gower, was informed and found bones of elephants on the 27th of December 1822. So this was a Talbot family, right? And I said the Talbot sisters found the bones. Then again, could the Davises have found the bones in 1822, or what is exactly going on here? Because the story is not consistent. Reverend Buckland was contacted, but Reverend Buckland was already, and there's no mention of Dilwyn in this bit here, when Dilwyn is a massive part of the story. So William Buckland is said to have arrived, on the 18th of January, 1823. And now we know William Buckland spent 2 days there, and he made all these wonderful discoveries when the tide was coming in and out. And you could only get there at low tide or climb in through that blowhole. This is when apparently his famous discovery was made. Later that year, writing in his book, Reliquiae Dilvanae, Reliquiae Dilvanae is basically the translation out that is the great inundation, the great flood, right? And that's what the book was about. It was about the great flood. He was on about Noah's great flood, right? And basically he said that all the artifacts in there are associated with the great flood. So in other words, you've got all these artifacts in there that were washed in there by the great flood, and they happen to be Roman remains as well that were found in there, right? Which would be quite appropriate, wouldn't it? You get an old set of remains from another cave, you dump in here, and you chuck a load of Roman stuff in there, and it links in with this theory, doesn't it? That it's a Roman prostitute. And then Buckland tells us the following. Now, some of what Buckland tells us is very different from his mate Dilwyn, who also gives another account. And the one I believe is not Buckland. Buckland had all the glory. Dilwyn didn't. And nor did the Talbot sisters are not mentioned because they're females. I found the skeleton enveloped by a coating of a kind of ruddle, basically ochre. Now, ochre isn't native to the area. It had to be brought in from somewhere else. And it was only in that spot that it was found. And it was quite a nice, consistent layer. Everything else was to pot in the cave. It was all jumbled up. But strangely enough, in one part of the cave, it happened to be that everything was nicely organized. Nicely organized. Only certain types of bones were well organized. Close to this part of the thigh bone were pockets, and pockets of this ruddle, sort of loads of this ruddle there, this sort of ochre. And there were also found 2 handfuls of periwinkle shells. Very few of them have actually survived. As another part of the skeleton, there were found, there were found between 40 or 50 fragments of ivory rods. Now, come on a minute, right? It's either 40 or 50 bits of ivory rods. This is his own account. He can't even tell us how many ivory rods there were. The last time I worked out, 40 and 50 are 2 big figures. They're 2 differences. There's a 10 number difference between 40 and 50. He said about. Well, what? You know, ivory rods. Mammoth ivory rods, as we now know. There were small fragments of rings made of same ivory found with the rods. Both rods and rings, as well as the nerite shells, which are the periwinkles, which I used to eat when I was a child, were stained superficially with reds. Oh, there you go, the word superficially. But the point I'm trying to make, if it was all buried at the same time, right, then it'd all be impregnated at the same level of impregnation with this ruddle, right? Having a body in there which has already been defleshed with this undisturbed, and then somebody comes in here without disturbing the bones, and they put a load of periwinkle shells in there and all the other rods and all the other stuff, and then it's superficially stained, it doesn't make any sense, right? Now, what Dilwyn does, he rips apart Buckland from a contemporary level, but he's supposed to be a friend of Buckland. Who needs enemies when you've got friends like that? But anyway, he's actually telling us what happens is Dilwyn is actually giving us a genuine account. He's just basically saying as it is. Buckland is publishing a book within weeks of this discovery, proving about his great flood, his great inundation of water. And this is evidence that the flood happened, and this is evidence that all this stuff is churned up. And obviously the Romans were evil bastards, you know, so you need to chuck them in there. So Buckland could be forgiven for getting the sex of the body wrong. It could have been a tall butch woman. I know Goths come across a lot of them, particularly Ukrainian women. Buckland believed that human remains could not be any older than the biblical Great Flood or after the Great Flood. And it's believed that, for example, we know we know that they were talking back then that the Earth was formed 6,000 years ago, right? We now know it's closer to 6 billion years ago. But the fact of the matter is, it was to try to prove a theory. So he's saying that the artifacts in there only date to about 2,000 years ago, and that's all. No more, nothing less. Right. So that's a very, very good point. Now, at that time, and the other thing as well is, can I just give you one other little point, right? Just another little point, right? It was very difficult to identify Roman pottery back then. They did not have the scientific stuff. So how did they know that the pottery that you were looking at was Roman, unless it had come from an existing Roman site that they knew about? Do you know what? When you do something like this, a second time, everything else comes forward because you've already analysed it once, twice, 3 times. Now, can we just stop there a minute? When I was before the pandemic, and this before the pandemic, I was meant to be doing a live evening with Karl-James Langford. I remember mentioning it in my Lancet Major class, and what that was, we were gonna. I had hired a hall in Chepstow, and it was going to be a stage thing, and I'd have all these images up on the stage, and I'd say, look, this is why I think this is a forgery at Paviland Cave. And that's what I was going to do. And maybe if I'd done it then, I wouldn't have all the stuff in my head that I've got now, that I'm giving to you. Buckland believed, I don't know where we are with fact checking now, we'll forget that. Fact 200, fact 10 or something. Anyway, Buckland believed the skeleton was female because it was discovered with decorative items, including perforated seashells and jewelry thought to be of elephant ivory, but now known to be carved from the tusk of a mammoth. Hold that there, folks. Hold that one fact there. And Dilwyn, you've probably read some of the Dilwyn stuff anyway. I mean, you'll know that the Talbot sisters are in there, and there's a relationship going on, blah blah blah, with these male protagonists. These decorative items combined with the skeleton's red dye caused Buckland to mistakenly speculate that the remains belonged to a Roman prostitute or witch. Now that's really interesting, right? Although we found other bodies in Britain which have this red ochre, red ruddle. Now the one thing I would say is that if this is really strange, if you're trying to sort of forge something and you were a male, the avenue you would take is that you would bury the body as a forgery with like flint axes and all the things that would make it masculine, right? But strangely enough, the body was actually buried with, was actually buried with these decorative items, right? Which doesn't make sense. Now, the one thing I wasn't asked on Tuesday was that if this is a forgery, who was responsible for the forgery? I don't believe that Buckland was responsible for the forgery. I do believe that Buckland was hoodwinked and made to believe it was genuine. And seeing as that everything was taken out within 2 days and put into boxes and none of the soil survived, there's all those things about it. Now, what we are going to say, right? What we are going to say is that another bit of a fact check before we sort of open the diluvian flood, antediluvian flood. Before one thing that we are going to do, we're going to finish this stuff and then do some other bits and pieces, and then we'll do the Dilwyn diaries after the break. So analysis of the evidence from not just one excavation site, but over a number of dates, and Longhole Cave, including sediments and pollen, as well as lithic evidence. Longhole Cave is of exactly the same date as all the evidence at Paviland Cave. But at Longhole Cave, which is further on down the coast, there isn't as many artifacts as found at Paviland Cave. Longhole Cave, the archaeology is a little bit more organized and makes a little bit more sense than at Paviland Cave, and don't even go where I think that these artifacts have actually come from, because that is another lecture, and I may have put a spoke in my own wheels. The cave was then partially re-excavated in 1912, and the thing is, it was sort of found that there were some bits and pieces still left there, but nothing substantial, because everything had either been taken away or washed away by the sea anyway. So set the scene. I believe that everything's just been dumped in the cave. It needed a little bit of a while to wash everything out of there. It was quite convenient that everything is found there. And if you go to the cave today, there's nothing in it at all. It's water swept. Now, if it's water swept today, how is it wasn't water swept in the past? So these are points. Not much has happened with tide levels and all the rest of it. And also, did you know there was a tsunami? Oh God, this is really going well. I didn't even mention this on Tuesday. Did you know there was a tsunami on the 20th of January in the year 1606? If that's the case, and as this was directly along the coastline, anything in that cave would have just been washed out. So how has it survived 33,000 years? When they took the artifacts and they radiocarbon dated them, this was in the 1960s, it was believed that this Red Lady of Paviland could not have been from the Roman period, even though the archaeological evidence in the cave said that it was. Can I just give you one other point, because I'm going to forget this? I really am, because this is like this is really important. There was a mammoth skull found. You see the size of that mammoth skull? Reverend Buckland had it on his desk in Oxford University. I'll tell you what happened to it in a minute. In the 1960s, Kenneth Oakley dated the body due to new radiocarbon dates to around 20,000 years ago. But these radiocarbon dates push back the dating of the individual at Paviland Cave in 1989, 1995, and then in 2007 and then 2009 to 33,000 years ago. So this is really important that we actually know that the remains, as you can see, this is our mammoth skull. Do you want me to tell you about the mammoth skull? No, I'm not going to do that in a minute. So mammoth bones were found, and obviously we've got mammoth ivory being used for the wands and stuff and being really important. So mammoths wandered that part of the coast. What I would say is that the archaeological remains come from a cave very nearby. It's just been organized and assembled in that cave. And by Dillwyn's notes, it basically proves what I'm thinking. Although now the coast, we've got this, it was 70 miles away. Although it's the coast now, was 70 miles away from where the coast was. And basically the temperature back then, probably in the summer months, would have been no more than about 10 degrees. In the winter months, it would have been on average minus 20 degrees, but it wasn't as cold as it had been, minus 40 degrees, and it hadn't been as cold as it would be. Some of the interesting things, and again, back to this point, is genuine. All this stuff is genuine, but it's just being put together. And the meaning for it being put together has probably already been answered, because they wanted to assist Reverend Buckland in his theories. They found out that the individual from the bone protein, the evidence tells us that they had around 20% fish meat protein in their diet. And my computer screen's gone off a minute just because I didn't refresh it. So if you could bear with me a second. Right, it's coming up. So as we're waiting for that, let's tell you about this skull. This skull was a skull like this was found, and you can see the size. And I've sat down. And I thought, well, hang on a minute. One sec. Right, good. Yeah, my computer went off. This skull itself, I've probably not this skull, but a skull similar to this. Reverend Buckland found a skull at Paviland Cave, right? And if we go to here, you can actually see where the skull is in the ground. And if you look at this, you can probably work out that the skull might be a bit smaller than the one that we've actually seen, but the skull itself is quite large, right? And it's said that Reverend Buckland took this to his office, his study at Oxford University, and he put it on the end of his desk as like a trophy, right? So that people could see it. One day, when he went home, he got back the next day, and strangely enough, the skull was missing. And it's always said that Reverend Buckland said that it must have fallen on the floor somewhere and he couldn't find it again. No, straight up, right? Straight up. Again, you know, there's the skull. It was never found again, right? It disappeared in his office, right? You know, I've come up with all sorts of theories. You know, maybe it sort of rolled off, and you know, just think of that. Just think of that. just think of that. It rolled off, and maybe it sort of fell into a million bits, and it just like, that's what happened. And it's just unbelievable, but that a skull like this can disappear. Completely unbelievable. And where did this come from? And, there's all these questions. But we do know that some of the other artifacts are actually made out of mammoth ivory. So that's really, really important. Back to my notes again. I managed to get my notes back up on the computer. So it's sort of working okay. So we got the bone protein saying he got 20% fish in his diet. He would have obviously lived some distance from the sea, but he probably had a sedentary, mobile, nomadic lifestyle. When the skeleton was discovered, Wales lacked a museum to house it, so it was moved to Oxford with the skull. And Oxford University loaned the artifacts nicely to the National Museum of Wales for display in the exhibition associated with that illustration, which is completely wrong. Subsequent excavations in 1912 yielded flints, which are not flints, they're chert, teeth and other bones, needles, bracelets, and all other things that some of them have ended up on display in Swansea Museum. So there's some of the fact checks, and what we're gonna do, right? One thing that I did do, I deliberately on Tuesday, I didn't have these images ready. I said, what we're gonna do a search. If we type in Paviland cave, and there you go, you can see I've already done it. These are basically some of the artifacts. So what you've got the periwinkle shells. Not all of them survived. They just got a coating on. So if you wash them, the coating would have washed off. But if you wash the bones, it didn't remove from the bones. This itself, hang on a minute. That there, the one on the right, is actually pierced. There's a piercing through it, and that's believed to be some kind of pendant. And these are the artifacts. We're going to do a fact check, right? This is not flint. The notes in front of me tell me it's flint. This is not flint. This is chert, right? So even when the official stuff that's published out there, it's wrong. And you start to think, well, how are the people making so many rudimentary mistakes? And then I start to think the biggest rudimentary mistake is actually the fact that it never originated from that cave in the first place. It came from somewhere else for reasons that I've probably already answered. Do you know what? It's 11:43, and we have done a big chunk of what I wanted to do today. So what I'm going to say is, anyone wanted to do any research on this, the Wikipedia stuff isn't brilliant, because but when you do research about the Lady of Paviland, it's based on the Wikipedia stuff, right? Except if you want to, there is some other stuff out there, the Royal Commission on Ancient Historical Monuments. And what we're going to do after the break, we're going to refresh on some of the facts by more accredited academics, right? And then we're going to, but unfortunately, these accredited academics claim that is flint. It's not. It's chert, and even that's wrong. Oh my God, this might be based on Wikipedia as well. But so what I'm trying to say is, I've got to hone in, right? And what I've got to hone in is I've got to tame myself a bit, and I've got to go with the Natural History Museum, right? I've got my Natural History Museum entry here. And what we're not going to do is fact check, but we're going to go through everything, and you can work out what I agree or disagree with. This is a little entry from the Museum of Natural History. And if anyone ever does go to the Museum of Natural History, right, and they let me know in advance, I can get you free tickets to an exhibition, because the person who's presenting this today has actually, you can hear my voice in one of the displays there, talking about dinosaur footprints. So but anyway, the reason why I mention this is the Museum of Natural History. So I've got this in front of me. What image shall I show? Because I know Goff likes his images. A periwinkle shell, that'll do. So here we go. All right, the Red Lady of Paviland. In 1823, geologists excavating the remains of mammoths in Goat's Hole Cave, also known as Paviland Cave, made an intriguing discovery. Yeah, definitely intriguing. A discovery was made. That was the thing. It was made. But in which context is what we're discussing. A partial human skeleton covered in red ochre, accompanied by shell beads and carved ivory. We can go with that. The find was made by William Buckland. Well, yeah. Oxford University's first reader in geology. Yeah, that's true. The presence of the beads and other ornaments led him to conclude that the bones were of a woman, and the find quickly became known as the Red Lady of Paviland. So in other words, even up until the 1920s or 30s, anyone found with feminine artifacts was seen to be a woman. Anyone found with male artifacts was said to be a man. Now, and the great example of this is where we get a Swedish warrior. It's said that the Swedish warrior was actually female. Yeah, and then they started looking at the bones. They worked out that all the evidence of the sword and the scabbard and the boss and dagger and all the rest of it, and the good strength of the bones. They actually looked at it and they actually found there was a woman buried with artifacts, supposed masculine artifacts. And you know what? The archaeologists turned around and said, "Oh, they must have been a dance." So, you know, I hate this thing in archaeology that masculine and feminine actually mean something to masculine and feminine. And you know, obviously, when you find male artifacts, they got to belong to a man and so on. But when we look at deeper at about a Viking civilization, what we do see about Viking civilization is that Viking civilization was dominated by women. So, of course, those artifacts would be feminine. Another fact check. We now know that they are the remains of a young man and far more ancient than the Roman period. I missed a little bit about the Roman because we've already done it. In 2008, 2009, scientists improved the radiocarbon dating techniques, which showed that the bones are from a body that might not only date from 33,000 years ago, but 34,000 years ago from a less cold episode during the last glaciation, making the Red Lady one of the oldest examples of a ceremonial burial in Western Europe. Stone tools and burned animal bones show that he could have been one of the hunters that used the cave over many thousands of years. Yeah, fair enough. How he died remains a mystery, but the evidence indicates that he was buried ceremonially. Oh, God. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Okay, we'll do that. Or maybe they just put red ochre on it because they had just defleshed the bones and they wanted a way of, I don't know, closure, or they wanted a way of getting rid of the smell or something. I don't know. Scientists are looking to extract DNA from one of the leg bones to find out more about who he was and where he came from. Do you know what I would do? Is match bones from other caves to see which cave this body came from in the first place, and you'll have more answers. So we need to put the body back in its context. But the context was to Reverend Buckland, where he needed to prove at that time. So that's basically it. So do you know one thing I've this is from the heart now. I've been involved in archaeology for quite some time. I've got lots of archaeological reports that I need to get on with, and I need to publish them and so on. And it comes on the back of an archaeologist that I know has been my inspiration. I won't give his name, but I found out he's got Parkinson's disease. And do you know what? You would give him a piece of pottery, and he'd put his eyeglass in, and he'd tell you precisely which part of the country it was from. And he lived and died archaeology, and his memory's going, and all that information is lost. And in some ways, the reason why I record these lectures is that if anything ever happens to me, the information's out there that I've researched. and giving you some information as well. And that's why I do it. Some days I think archaeology is an absolute pain in the arse and I don't want to do it. But when you get things like this, you actually realize that it's actually making it worthwhile, and that people are learning things. So this is why I do it. So we're going to, that would be quite a nice end to a lecture, but we haven't actually got to the end yet because we've got the Dilwyn stuff after the break. Depending on how long that takes. So what I'm going to do, we're going to, I might lose connection for a minute because I've got to phone off this, but keep on there, you know the usual trick. Let's just sort of stop. Yeah, by the way, on Tuesday I had Wednesday it was an absolute disaster. Whenever I pressed the button on the screen, all my images would go very similar to what's happened today. And by the way, what before we ask any questions, and do you know what I'm going to say to both of you? I want to say, have I been too lectury today? Have I been trying to force this thing down your throat? I don't care what you want to reply to that because I've asked you the question. So that's a very important thing. Before I say that though, before you have your say, and I want you to be very honest with me actually, and if you agree or disagree, very honest, and then we'll ask the same question at the end. Next week we're doing Craswell Crags up near Derbyshire, between the border of Yorkshire and Derbyshire. Right, so I've asked you a question there, and obviously asked you if you've got any questions themselves. And I think the best person to answer this might be, because you're on the screen. So Henry, answer those three questions. Have I been too lectury? Have I been trying to force this down your throat? And what do you think?
No, I think you've been trying. I think I would say you've been trying to make us look at things in a different light and be more observing. You know, not to just take facts at face value and actually analyze the elements.
Yeah.
I mean, what I found quite intriguing, I've had a very quick look on the internet, and you've got things like the Bradshaw Foundation, which are pumping this out, saying it's all perfectly above board and legit. It's the real deal.
Yeah, I think I may have looked at that myself, and but then again, there are doubts and speculation, and when I said I'm okay with you saying that, right? Naturally, I am, and I'm not going to even think of digging myself out of a hole because I'm in a hole. I've been in this hole with Lady of Paviland for some time, and I come out with more. I think more and more things about this. I think that answers the three questions, doesn't it? And I asked you, yeah, go on.
There's other observations I make. I mean, the Mammoth Skull. I mean, how did the mammoth actually climb its way in there? I mean, if you were butchering, you wouldn't butcher necessarily in a cave. You'd butcher outside.
And it's quite a big skull. And the other thing as well is actually Alice Roberts. I'm told in her book, she actually said that one person actually claims that the mammoth climbed into that cave. So why don't you just discount that straight away? Just discount it. It's crap. My friends, there are things about this that are rubbish. And again, it all comes down to this, right? Water can be very destructive. I've not seen it myself, where I've not experienced it. Okay, I've not experienced, but I've seen it where 1 minute you can get a 2-ton slab of rock. A 2-ton slab of rock is there 1 minute, and a few days later, after a big storm, it's up there, right? Well, now, if water can do that, then this is just so close to the coast. Everything's going to go.
Yeah, and you've got a blowhole, so you've got water shooting out the top of the cliff. So anything in there is going to be flushed out.
And blowholes are only formed when water gets to a certain locality. They're not formed before. And this is Carboniferous rock. And the other thing as well is, right, knowing my geology, right, that blowhole, forget it being a blowhole a minute. Let's just talk about chips as chips without red sauce, right? The point is that hole itself, if it had been formed in antiquity, would have been filled with blue lias limestone, right? A blue lias limestone is what all these caves are made out of. What in the past, what's happened is you've got Carboniferous rock, 350 million years ago, has formed. It rises out of the ground. It it sort of rises as features out the ground, and then it's there's erosion, and in some parts of Wales it's filled with sandstone from the Triassic period, like down at the Bendrix, like in Barry. That's Carboniferous and Lias limestone and red Triassic sandstone. But here, what happened is that then it drops, and then it forms not in an open lake where sandstones forms, it opens in the sea. So limestones form in sea, sandstones form on land. That's basically it. So what happens is this sinks down again, and all those holes that have been formed due to erosion whilst it's been above the ground are then plugged with blue Lias limestone. And then it erodes again, and that soft rock is eaten away. That Lias limestone, which was plugged in the caves, is eaten away. But it's likely that if that fissure had been formed in a rock and it's not a blowhole, right, that would have still been filled with sediment and blue Lias limestone, and there was no reason why it needs to be a hole, right? When this was discovered, it happened to be a hole when it was discovered. Back to the blowhole.
Yeah.
Flippin' heck. Right. Yes, this is a very, and you will get people who will die and say that I'm wrong. And I've got somebody who has written a load of stuff online as they've been listening to this. Well, this is an extra one. Hello, Carl. He was with us last week. They say, yes, I agree that the bones were moved, destroying any real finds useless. The mammoth in the room, interesting. Like CSI, follow the evidence, not make the evidence fit the theory. Here we go. Well, the wealthy wrote the history. Bloody Romans roaming everywhere. What have the bloody Romans done for us? Be right back. Coffee time. Okay, fair enough. That's point of view. And the other thing as well is what we need to do. We need to go with Goff.
I've got no questions. It's something you dealt with before. You wonder why. What was the reason for this fraud? You know, I can't see the why they want to do it. You know, but
well, I think the answer is that these people communicating, as we will see with the Dilwyn diaries, they knew that Buckland was writing this book, and he was on the edge of completing it. But he didn't really have much evidence in it. It was sort of hearsay. He was a reverend. You know, he was involved in a university that Oxford department was very, very religious. They did the religious teaching thing, and this was giving credence and backing for his religious teaching. It's a bit like what.
It's amazing the controversy and the intrigue in the archaeological world at that time.
Exactly. It's a bit like the Piltdown Man forgery. That was to prove a point, and people believed it. The other thing as well is, right, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say it as it is. I'm sure that 99% of all archaeologists will take the line on this, right? But there's 1%, a small number of us, including me, that says no. That's what happened with the Piltdown Man forgery. Everyone believed the Piltdown Man forgery, including the British Museum, Oxford, everyone, and nobody chose to question it until 1949, and the rat was out of the box in 1953, right? This has been too long coming, and nobody is questioning the evidence, and nobody's questioning the really poor illustrations that are being made. That's when I say really poor illustration. The illustrator in that illustration that we've seen is brilliant, right? But the evidence in it is wrong. So we've got to sort of be very very open-minded when we look at all these things. So right, so we're going to take a break now. I'm gonna grab a proper cup of tea, and this time I'm not gonna jump under the table.
Don't drop your mammoth head.
I might lose it.
In a crack in the caravan.
See you later.
So, yeah, well, we'll be 10 minutes, folks. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Oh yeah, I'm going to dash a second because I got to take a phone call, but then I'll be back online, so we're not going to lose anything. And oh, here we go. This is from Henry. It says, one item took my eye is from back home. Worth a look. The 3,000-year-old old Glendashire God Cara, top of the world yourself, from County Clare here. The reason why nobody goes to a lecture on Irish archaeology is because it's so long in the innuendo that nobody knows what the hell you're talking about. I'll be back. Right, okay, let's just phone Owen. Owen. Happy Owen. Happy Owen. Happy Owen. Happy Owen.
Right. Okay.
La 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 la.
Oh, greetings.
Mm.
That's a pleasurable sight.
The thing is, right, eating a biscuit with a cup of tea, and you haven't had a cup of tea in hours, so maybe what could happen, right? The Russian invasion might begin at Britain, hidden in the storm.
Well, I've just been out in the back garden. Should I be worried that I can hear the sea hitting the cliffs?
Oh, can you?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
I think. Do you think you're going to live for another 50 years? Because if so, you have to start worrying. When you get to your 49th birthday, just jump over the cliff and you won't have a problem of losing your house to the sea. Job done. I'm just being positive. I know you're only 50, so you get to 100 and job done.
I don't think the cliff is moving that fast at the moment.
Well, if you mention it to a load of Irish navvies who want some building material, they might move it quicker. So, do you know what? I love having a penchant for the Second World War. The Battle of Panderborn. So let's see who won the Battle of Panderborn.
Where was that?
That was the Allied invasion of Germany. The Battle of Panderborn. And we're just gonna hang on a minute. Oh, it was a US general who was actually killed. The second highest ranking general in the American army. And do you know what? It might be a German victory. Oh, bollocks. Sorry, my French. It's an American victory, unfortunately. And it was on the 30th and 31st of March, 1945. An American victory. So there you go. And that's it, really. I just thought I'd say that. There's very little detail in you. I'm really disappointed. Sod it. Anyway, it's an American bridgehead into Germany on the 30th and 31st of March, 1945. During the final weeks, the Americans were racing into Germany with General Patton's Third Army
to collect as much goodies as they could.
Yeah, that's true. It's probably the best time to be a German officer being killed in the war, actually. Right. Are we ready?
Oh, we're ready.
We're all ready, are we? All right. No, I don't.
It's just reading his will.
I don't want a career in the civil service. It's not the done thing, is it? Right. So what we've done. Well, oh God, I forgot we're still recording. There you go. What we've done, we've looked at the this sort of nice little account from the Natural History Museum. That was okay. So what I think I should do, if I'm going to try and be biased and unbiased at the same time, I think what I need to do is use my Dilwyn stuff first. I need to read through that, and then I need to come back with some fact checking from the Royal Commission on Ancient Historical Monuments. So that's where we'll leave today. So we'll do the Dilwyn stuff now, and I'll just write that in there. And yeah, let's go for it. So before the break, we were looking at various images. And the one image that I maybe should share in front of us, whilst we're doing the Dilwyn Rees diaries. Why do I keep calling Dilwyn Rees? Never mind. Dilwyn. The Dilwyn diaries. And if we go to here, and we go with these periwinkle shells. We mentioned the periwinkle shells. We've mentioned looking now, when you look out the cave today, right? Doesn't that look a bit narrow? Doesn't that look a bit restrictive? You can get a full elephant in there, 4 of them, fit side by side.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And actually, that one gives you a little bit of a scale, so it's not huge, is it? Do you think you might get a mammoth?
I think the mammoth one is a bit of a red herring.
No, it's a mammoth, not fish. And one thing that I wanted to do, that was good. One thing I wanted to do was mention that we will be looking.
Where's the stairs for the mammoth to climb up to the cave?
No, it used a lift. What we're going to be looking at other caves as well, and then we're going to link in with Paviland Cave in the future. And this is Cattle Cave, where you've got the cave art, and we've got Longhole, and we're looking at all them in the future. So I thought I'd mention that briefly. So what I'd like to do now, I'd like to go up to this. We've mentioned this. We've been very critical. There's Paviland in connection with Longhole Cave, and there we go. Nice illustration. So there's a few of them, but they're mainly all the same thing. And I think the one with a nice bit of color is the best one. This has been a bit touched up, this one here. That's the black and white. So let's just go with what we know is best. And do you know what, right? We know it so well. I've just pressed the off button. And there's the other location of some of these sites. Cattle I've already mentioned. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to type this back in now. Hopefully I can re-get that image, because I'm going to need it. God, my silly hands today. Paviland Cave. Which one is it? Oh, come on. We need it. Sugar and spice. Got the ones we don't need. Right, here we go. If I type in illustration, should it be on here? It's just on there. Illustration. It's me rushing it once. I should take more note of what Goff's been saying. Illustration. There we go. There it is. Love it. Good. Let's not faff around anymore. Right, so we got that there, and we've got here, and this is what Dilwyn would have seen, right? Obviously not the sketch itself. It's quite a nice sketch, but actually one little thing about this is, I'm going to say it, right? I'm just going to say it. If the deposits were that tall at the back of the cave, how did they form? Do you see my point? How are they like that? Sort of really angular and sort of, yeah, whatever. So I'm gonna go on to the Dilwyn stuff now, and cut the farm flab and the Dilwyn Rees diaries. And these were created between 1817 and 1852. Now the Dilwyn Rees diary, the Dilwyn diaries, right? October the 13th, 1817 to July the 12th, 1852. They really tell a lot about our friend Dilwyn, Lewis Weston Dilwyn. And he was born in 1778, 21st of August, if that comes in with anything. And his diaries themselves are a really good record of antiquarian society back then, how things really worked. Now, we do know that Dilwyn was a botanist. He was a natural historian. He was educated at Tottenham. Don't ask. In 1880, in his 20s, he became a member of the British Mineralogical Society, and after the purchase of by his father of Cambrian pottery, which comes into this, there's the link with Swansea. So Cambrian pottery, Swansea. Dilwyn moved to Swansea in 1803 to take charge of the business. So he'd have been aware of the Mansell family, the Talbot family, and all those great families of the day. And he left the pottery in favour of public life. He became High Sheriff of Swansea in 1818. He published scientific books. He was concerned with botany and antiquary. He's got biographical details being written about him, like the sort of Wikipedia of the day. He married a certain Mary Llewellyn in 1807. So Mary Llewellyn, thereby ensuring that John's future wealth upon John's inheritance of his grandfather's estate. John had a younger brother, Lewis Llewellyn Dilwyn, and two sisters, Fanny, older than himself, and Mary. Two other children died at an early age. Dilwyn's relationships with other prominent men of the time, and I will add women, and the early production, and basically, this is rather interesting, the early production of cave photographs by Dilwyn's son. So early photographs as well, great. So Dilwyn's on the bacon, right? He not only likes his bacon, he adds sauce with it. And he's a source of the age, and his son, and Swansea's association with the inventor of photography Henry Fox Talbot, the Talbot family, very wealthy family in the area, and basically the Talbots were a branch of the Penrice castle family of Gower, where Dilwyn often stayed. Now this is very important. Penrice itself is not far away. And if I can get a little map without stuffing this up. Right, okay, here we go. It's basically just above Port Eynon, right? So on the Gower, just above Port Eynon, well away from Swansea, and very close, within a little distance, horse and trap distance, Paviland Cave. Let's go back to that wonderful illustration again. And do you know what? I should stop faffing about because I'm going to lose everything in a minute. So Dilwyn often stayed with the Talbot family of Penrice, so that this is key. That this is the link. That this is the context. But there's more context in this than there is with the archaeology in the cave. He lived at Penllygaya Estate, which is a mansion outside Swansea. Building is no longer there. However, Dilwyn could visit friends on the Gower, either on foot or is on his horse-drawn carriage. Well, roads in the Gower today ain't brilliant, so I don't know how that works. But anyway, he would naturally, if he's going to go to the end of the Gower, to the Great Orme Peninsula, probably instead of about 3 or 4 hours to get back to Swansea, maybe a bit more than that, he's going to be very much in visiting the Talbot sisters at Penrice. Sometimes with his wife, sometimes without his wife. Yes. So here we go. Dilwyn's father lived London, and basically there would be often visits to see him in London, right? His father in London, in Walthamstow in London, right? He would make many visits to Bristol. He would go over to Bristol by boat, and then by mail coach, all the way over through to Gloucester, and then stop in at Oxford. And guess who we might bump into in Oxford? A certain Buckland, and you'd know about Buckland. His mother-in-law lived, and his son John was at university from 1828, but that's after the story. It's not really relevant. But before that, he would have had a relationship, not that type of relationship, but we would have had a relationship, academic relationship with Buckland. So it's really good. So they had convenient and pleasurable association with each other. But Dilwyn obviously tells us another story, which disagrees with Buckland's accounts. Between October the 13th, 1817, and we've got July the 12th, they're in 36 volumes. And much of it is of his personal life or business activities, but entries concerning Buckland and various cave excavations are invaluable in adding detail to what is already known. Did I mention the word various cave excavations? We don't know detail about some of those excavations and where the artifacts went to. Didn't say anything, did I? So there's all of this has been published. We'll move on a little bit with this. Other people now associated with caves besides Buckland were also known to Dilwyn. A certain Colonel Wood of Stout Hall, Reynoldstown, which is also on the Gower. He was the archaeologist who examined many of Gower's bone caves in the late 1840s and the 1850s, probably inspired by what had already been found with the ramblings of Reverend Buckland and other individuals like Talbot and Dilwyn. So with all this, what we do say, information concerning Wood's finds remains sparse, but nothing of Wood would be associated with anything of Buckland and Dilwyn, so we can write that one out. But the excavations are mentioned in the later reports of Dilwyn. He keeps an interest in the archaeology of the Gower well after Buckland's great discovery at Paviland Cave. This was a further factor that added to the frequency of Dilwyn's visits to London. However, although of general interest, these other mentions add nothing of substance on the subject of caves. Dilwyn's friend Buckland is the major exception. So what we're talking about is the information about Buckland is key to all this. So what we know about Buckland from Dilwyn's Ozontage, the Reverend William Buckland. Hang on a minute. I gotta hang on. Decline that one. You still there, guys? Have you still got that sharing? Are you still there?
Yeah, we got
there
a
was
picture. We got a picture of you. Oh, we got a cave.
Yeah, there was a phone call coming at that time, right? Anyway, Reverend William Buckland, professor of geology at Oxford, and we know later on, and we know from Dilwyn that Reverend Buckland was a speleologist. He liked his caves. He liked his cave archaeology. His work is adequately covered elsewhere. Dilwyn's diaries serve to supplement what is known about his life and correct. Hang on a minute. Let's use that. Correct some erroneous details surrounding the excavation of Paviland Cave. That's actually key. Dilwyn's first brief reference to Buckland occurs in London on November the 27th, 1819. But there are no details given, save that Dilwyn dined with him, and this is November 27th, at Dr. Wollaston's. Dr. Wollaston, there we go. Buckland was well known to those at Penrice on the Gower and often corresponded with one of the sisters. Hang on a minute, right? Didn't we say earlier on that Reverend Buckland didn't actually go to the Gower until the 23rd of 23rd of January in 1823, but he was known to the Talbot sisters well before that. So could he have visited the cave? Anyway, that's the spirit of a red herring. This was interspersed with visits, for example, on the 17th of October 1821, when Dilwyn met him in Swansea en route to Penrice. So hang on a minute, Buckland's already got an association with the Gower. This is really interesting. So why wasn't he the one who made the first discoveries in the cave? He was so known to the Talbot sisters and others at that time that they would have been very wary of his landmark book publication. So this is the 21st of 1821, the 17th of October, 1821, a little bit before still. On this occasion, Buckland was taken by Dilwyn to his home at Penlagaya, where he stayed until the 19th. These were the first of many reported meetings, both on the Gower and in London and Oxford. So these guys were great buddies. You know, they were great pals, like me and Gough. You know, we meet up for a drink in a pub, you know, those types of things. While staying at Oxford, Dilwyn often attended Buckland's lectures, so he was inspired. He was inspired by what Buckland had to say. You can imagine those lectures, can't you? You remember on Carry On Behind, where Professor, oh God, what's his name? Professor Ronald Crump I can't remember his name. Kenneth Williams played it in that film, and he had a mammoth. Strangely enough, he had a mammoth skull on his desk, and he accidentally knocked it off his desk, and it fell on the floor and went into smithereens, and that's in the film. Wonder where he got that inspiration from. He was a type of Reverend Buckland in Carry On Behind. That was Kenneth Williams. So but Dilwyn stayed in Oxford, and there is also Buckland. Buckland had excavated at Kirkdale in the north a tape known as Kirby Caves between and basically this was something that inspired Dilwyn when he went to one of his lectures, Buckland's lectures about it in Oxford on the 16th in 1822. They were close colleagues and spent a lot of time both then and later touring the colleges or examining specimens. So, you know, they were really into this. We don't hear this side of Buckland at all. And we don't hear the side that Buckland, you know, Buckland is a Jekyll and Hyde character where he seems to be taking a lot from things. This is a rather interesting one. They had lots of meetings, and there was one on the way back from Bohemia. Buckland and Dilwyn bumped into each other. Bohemia, a part of the old Austro-Hungarian Empire. On the way back, 4th of November, 1822, they bumped into each other. Now, here we go. This is Dilwyn. Having returned to Swansea, Dilwyn became involved with some of the first examinations of Paviland Cave, then known as Goat Hole. Hang on, that's Dilwyn. Where's Buckland in this? This cave became exceptionally important archaeological site. The first inspection was made sometime in 1822 by the Reverend John Davis and his brother Surgeon Daniel Davis, both from Reynoldston on the Gower. Both men were probably known to Dilwyn at this time, although their surname being so common in the area, it is difficult to determine this with any certainty. So there were probably other Reverend Davises, but this Reverend John Davis often dined at Penlagaya according to diary entries. So everyone's, you know, there's so much going on here, that there's so much of a boys' club going on. It's a little bit more to go, actually. So there is a great association between these characters. So here we go. However, it was not Dilwyn, but the more local Talbot family that was first informed of the find by the Davises. When the curate, Reverend John Davis, brought 2 Roman coins from the cave to be deposited in the museum at Penrice Castle. Now, this is rather interesting. What the hell are Roman coins being found in a cave like this? It just doesn't make sense. Daniel Davis also found a coin of Emperor Carausius that dates to the 290s, not 33,000 years ago. Although its eventual fate is unknown, all these things disappeared, actually. And other artifacts were found there vis-a-vis dating to that period. So, yeah, interesting. At the time of Paviland's examination by Davis, Dilwyn was entertaining a certain Sir Humphrey Davy. Davy was the inventor of the Davy lamp, Penlagaya. This guy, this Dilwyn, has got his finger in everything. Another friend of both the Dilwyns and the Talbots was also present, the Reverend Trahan. And Trahan, he was an amateur geologist, and Trahan ties in with the story of discoveries on Barry Island. A portrait of Trahan is to be found from a book from 1962, and I think that may have been at Penrice Castle. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read this out in full, this next paragraph. It gets very confusing, but you need to try and probably have a bit of paper, right? Which I'm going to do. So I mucked this up. The amount of times I've read this and mucked it up. So here we go. On the 26th of December, this is 1822, Dilwyn, Trahan and Davy, we know who they were. The geologist Trahan, Davy Lamb, went by carriage to stay at Penrice for a few days. This house must have been huge. The following day, the 27th, Dilwyn and Trahan went to Paviland to inspect the cave. So obviously, this is after the Davises have found this the previous year. So everyone's aware of this. The Talbots and the Dilwyn at this point, they took with them the eldest of the Talbot sisters, a Mary Teresa Talbot. So we need to put Mary Teresa Talbot, right? So she's the eldest sister. She was the daughter of a famous MP called Christopher Cole from her first marriage to Christopher Mansell Rice Talbot of Margam. Here we go. Focus on Mary Teresa. Mary Teresa is not mentioned by name, but the other daughters, such as Jane or Charlotte, are. Although some confusion is created by the number of people named Mary, because the wife of Dilwyn is also Mary. In his diary, Dilwyn consistently follows correct forms of address, even occasionally extending this to members of his own family. Identification of Miss Talbot as being either of the two girls is therefore incorrect. So Miss Talbot in his diary is definitely Miss Mary Teresa Talbot, right? So there we go. This is where we go. This is one of the actual entries. Dilwyn's diary entries for 1822 include the following references to Paviland Cave. Friday, the 27th of December, John Trahan, Miss Talbot, who was the eldest of the Talbots' children, and I, Dilwyn, spent most of the day at a cavern which has been discovered on the coast about 6 miles west of Penrhys. I don't know, you could probably walk that in an afternoon, but he probably went in a horse and trap. And there we found the bones of elephants. So obviously referring to mammoths. But there is a point with this, guys. How do we know it was a mammoth skull if the skull didn't survive? When did this mammoth skull originate from? We've got no dire date. Could it have been an elephant from tens of thousands of years earlier? Saturday, the 20th of December, Miss Talbot and I went again. Hang on. So take a note of that. Mary Teresa Talbot, 28th of December, Miss Talbot and I went again to the cavern and brought away a great quantity of bones. Sir Davy and Trahan left us, and in the afternoon I returned home. There's talk that there was something going on between this other Mary and Dilwyn. The bones removed from the cave were retained in the family museum at Penrhys. This account differed slightly from a later one by Dilwyn, normally used as the basis of dating the visits. Being part of his day-to-day diary, it can be taken as the more accurate. In 1840, as part of a project to raise money for the Swansea Infirmary, Dilwyn wrote a book titled Contributions Towards a History of Swansea. In this, he included entries in diary form. For the Paviland excavation, he incorrectly gives the date as December the 23rd. It's clearly December the 28th. And he mentions Trahan, but not, he mentions Miss Talbot, but not Trahan as his companion. Ooh, I'm sure his wife wouldn't be too impressed. Paviland being an obvious important discovery, Buckland was informed of the find by Lady Mary. We think is actually this same Mary Teresa Talbot. He immediately responded with a letter to Penrhys, not to Lady Mary, but to Mary Teresa. Yeah, I've made the mistake. So Lady Mary is actually the mother of Mary Teresa Talbot. Anyway, carry on. I've made that mistake there. Only using the formal title of Miss Talbot, not Lady Mary, oh God, in which he asked for his thanks for the information to be conveyed to her mother. Right, it makes sense. His letter showed the great attention to detail that Buckland required and indicates the interest that Mary Teresa must have herself had made for the subject. Now, this is a woman who's massively interested in discovery, hugely. It was also implied that Buckland knew of the cavern before Mary Teresa's own examination on the 27th. What? In his letter, he pleaded as his excuse a prior engagement and added, now this is rather interesting. This is rather interesting. I am indeed sorry not to have assisted at the opening of your very interesting new cave at Paviland, the circumstances of which must form another feature in my work, and of which I hope to receive from you and Dilwyn a full detail. Meantime, pray have the mouth closed up again to prevent destruction. What the hell does that mean? Read that again. Meantime, pray have the mouth closed up again to prevent destruction. Well, hang on a minute, right? What's waves, right? How else is it going to be destroyed? How else, right? So in other words, if that means it's talking about waves, right? There is no way these artifacts could have survived there in the first place if waves are already lapping into the cave. That is the point I'm making. A very important point there. There you go. It's just, and it's sloping as well. All you need is a big boom of a wave in there. It's all gone. Obviously, Buckland did not comprehend the side as the entrance. Or did he? And the entrance size would have been huge enough, big enough to stop closure, to stop the waves, meaning that anything would have been washed away. This is again back to Dilwyn. Buckland actually arrived in the company of John Treharne just after breakfast on the 18th of January 1823, earlier than Dilwyn expected. The men were engaged together geologically nearly all day, probably examining some of the specimens in Dilwyn's own collection. The next day, Sunday, the 19th. Here we go. Dilwyn writes the following in his diary again. So, Mr. Buckland, Jonathan Treharne, and I walked to and from Llangefallach Church in the morning. And Mary went, this is Dilwyn's wife now, not Mary Talbot or Lady Talbot, Miss Talbot. This is Dilwyn's wife. This is the other Mary, went in the carriage soon after. Buckland and Treharne went to Penrice, and I was prevented from accompanying them by more business. Right? Interesting stuff. But there is something major coming up. Dilwyn occupied the next day in Swansea, from where he went to Penrice with his wife Mary and his son John, arriving soon after 4. So it's going to be getting a little bit dark, isn't it? For the next 2 days, both Buckland and Dilwyn were involved with further examinations of the cave. Here we go. Tuesday, the 21st, went with Miss Talbot and John Treharne to meet Buckland, who had gone early at Goat Cave near Paviland, and from hence we went together to look at Hound's Hole and Deborah's Cave. We all got back to dine at Penrice. Why it's called Deborah's Cave, only Goff knows. Wednesday, the 22nd, Miss Talbot and Miss Grant went. Miss Grant was like a local socialite, and they went with John Treharne in a horse-drawn carriage, but he went on foot, and they basically at the head of the Great Tor, where Buckland found his way to examine the cavern without any success. So there's no success in examining the cavern. What the hell does that mean? From thence we went to Pennard Castle, and there Buckland and Treharne proceeded in their vehicle homeward, and the remainder of us returned to Penrice. The frost continues unusually severe. Now, that's all good stuff, right? So are we ending the story about Buckland's discovery? Did you notice there's nothing there in light of much in the way of what was discovered? That's unusual. So in another entry about Paviland Cave, this is no doubt key. Dilwyn. Mixed up in the rubbish on the floor With the remains of various animals, we found numerous small chips and other larger pieces of flint. They were chert, which were rudely knapped, as if these caves had once been places of concealment for a manufacturer of Celtic arrow heads and spears. And in amongst it, right, from the discovery of Roman coins and other similar artifacts produced in both the caves, both the caves, now both the caves, what other caves are you talking about? It may perhaps also be inferred that they were only the recesses of one much larger cavern when these manual operations were carried on. Well, we can go with a larger cavern, but can you see there, it's all mixed up? Doesn't make sense how you would get these bones are lined up, and everything's getting a bit weird now. Getting close to the end here, another find of a Roman coin was made in that cave on August the 12th, 1836. Now, can I just make a comment, right? If everything's in stratigraphy in the cave, the Roman stuff would be on the surface, right? Agreed? So how is it another Roman coin's being found in the cave in the lower levels, which will probably be in the same levels as a supposed discovery, which dates back tens of thousands of years earlier than the coin? Right, so that's not making sense either. From Dilwyn's account of the 21st, Buckland would have been taken to Paviland by either Trahan or Talbot on the 20th. Without this visit, he would not have been able to leave before the others and meet them there. And so an accurate date can be deduced from the initial examinations. The 2 days he spent in the cave were used as a basis for the entry in the Relique Diluvianae. I start again. Relique Diluvianae. Said it. The Great Book of Buckland, 1823, which was just basically Buckland was just completing it. This was found. He chucked it in there. Now I know how difficult it is to write books because I've written a few. So what we're going to do, we're going to mention a couple of other things. I'm going to call it day. Further associations with Buckland. Despite his obvious interest in the subject of geology and archaeology, Dilwyn did not follow further in Buckland's footsteps, although he did record other visits to caves and meetings with friends. The sea caves at Tresillian near Trahan's home were visited on the 10th of September 1825. And also at Dunraven, he visited Dunraven. That would have been in association with Trahan, because Trahan would have been active in the Vale of Glamorgan. Buckland is next encountered in Oxford by Dilwyn in November 1825, when Dilwyn is returning from London. On the 26th, he helped Buckland perform a rather strange examination, where they buried 24 toads in different stone containers in the ground to see how long they would survive. Strangely enough, they all died, bastards. And obviously, this is the time that his son is trying to get into Oxford in 1828. And then they met again in 1831 at Penlegaya. And Dilwyn, and basically it was the time that Buckland was again visiting more caves at Bacon and Mitchin Hole caves on the Gower. Buckland's examination of the two sea caves was therefore conducted alone at Bacon and Mitchin Hole. This inspection was much earlier than the first major excavations by Colonel Wood, which took place in 1850 and 1851. Remember, we don't have much in the way of Colonel Wood's records about this, which is a bit of a shame. And there's a certain Connobia mentioned. Connobia is actually the Reverend at Sully Church. And that's in the Vale of Glamorgan. And they basically, a group of them visit Caswell Cave. Not Caswell Crags, which is in Derbyshire, but Caswell Caves on the Gower. The next day, having stayed with Dilwyn, the two geologists left to visit John Jahan. The remains of the cave are still present just above high water mark at the west end of Caswell Bay, but it is presumed that much of the original passage has been lost by the action of the sea. And actually, that's actually interesting. That is very interesting. I missed that on Tuesday. Now, this is at Caswell Bay. The cave at Caswell Bay has been basically more or less lost because of sea action. And the point is, the sea there is quite treacherous, and there's and me saying that all this stuff has been washed away is very, very plausible. So we've got no more to say from the Dilwyn Diaries, but what we are going to close on is a little bit of other things. This is from the Royal Commission on Ancient Historical Monuments. This is their own entry online. This is a very, very brief entry indeed. And caves have been a focus of human activity since the remotest periods of prehistory. Very true. So we got Paviland Cave, and we've Goat Hole Cave on the coast. Is the most significant archaeological site in Britain of the early Upper Paleolithic period. The location of the first systematic excavation of a human skeleton, absolute nonsense. The excavation took place there in 2 days, and they lifted everything up and put them in boxes. I don't want to read any more of this because I disagree with all of it, but the limestone fissure is easily accessible only at low tide. Yeah. It has a history of exploration spanning almost 200 years, beginning when archaeology was still an antiquarian pursuit and when the ancient origins of mankind were unsuspected. Material gathered from the cave has included many thousands of flints, their chert, animal bones, shells, and worked ivory. In the 1990s, concerns over marine erosion combined with a growing awareness of the site's importance led to a comprehensive review of the cave, its geological context, the artifacts and the dating, and the remaining deposits. A vital part of the research project, which has engaged lots of experts. We know that the cave was well away from the coast back 34,000 years ago. The cave is now on the coast, but at the time of the Red Lady's burial, when sea levels were almost 80 meters lower than today, it was, as we know, 70 miles away from the modern day coast. The animal bones recovered, we've got nothing about the other animal bones being found in the cave. It's been, and this is the problem, it's been the absolute obsession with the Lady of Paviland Cave, which again, shame on me. Remains of mammoth bones have been found in there. Deposited there. Woolly mammoths, giant deer, bison, reindeer, horses, and even a statue of Lloyd George. Game may have been driven to its death over the cliffs by Paleolithic hunters. And then all these bones were gathered in the cave, whatever. And we got evidence of hyenas, wolves, and bears. So what we can say is that we do have this obsession with the Mammoth Skull, which has never been made the light of anything since. The DNA sequencing, the skeleton shows the pedigree of modern Europeans, while the slightly worn, adapted body proportions, when viewed within the broader available sample of contemporary remains, point to their African ancestry. Yeah, fair enough. Artifact evidence also revealed the presence more than 30,000 years ago of indigenous Neanderthals, human species eventually replaced by the newcomers. So that's new in this. The cave may have remained a sacred place, but in the millennium following the burial, it lay in a remote region that was eventually abandoned as the climate downturn intensified. Nevertheless, the growing ice sheet stopped short of the point, preserving the cave for future generations to investigate. So what we're going to do now, we'll just scroll through these images. So we've been seeing this one a lot today. Original entrance looking out, giving you an idea of the scale, which isn't vast. Obviously that guy's in the distance there but we know the proportions of it. It's not a vast sort of cave there. So again, we're looking at the bones, rib bones, the pelvic bones, the one side of the body. Obviously very little other than the bottom bones of the right hand side. So we've got that. And what else have we got here? And that image that we've seen a fair bit of today. And we've got and again we mentioned we've basically been through all these now, so we don't, and that gives you an idea of scale. So it's quite narrow really. but enough for anything to be washed out there and eroded into the sea, I'm sure. So what we're going to do, we're going to call that a day now, because it's got very, very late. There's our periwinkles again, artifacts, very little of the actual periwinkles found in the cave. These ones with holes placed into them. There is our mammoth ivory pendant. That's a replica of it, but obviously, we've got the original out there as well. Lots to say about Reverend Buckland. There's our Reverend Buckland. There he is, our academic from Oxford. And we mentioned about the mammoth skull, and obviously these as well. So what we're going to do now, we're going to finish now, and we're just going to close all these windows up on the screen so you know what they are. And that one, and there's that reconstruction. So nothing about the wands today, but that was quite a lot to do. So you can learn a lot more about this on the internet, so have a good read. Remember, anything you do see is probably all based on Wikipedia anyway. Most of it seems to be the same type of thing. So anyway, let's end. Is there anything you'd like to say, Goff?
No, it's those letters from the ladies and when they were down Gower. It's all very confusing, isn't it? And very smelly as well.
Yeah, it's if I've already drawn my conclusion at the beginning, but I feel that maybe to assist Buckland, this needed to be found, and it was found. And they were just helping him out, and this is what I think. And why it was moved from another cave was probably what they did. They took a little bit from one cave, another bit from another cave, and the bones must have been stained from another cave with some ochre. They must have got some more ochre in to actually gently sprinkle it on all the other artifacts. It looks like a forgery. It smells like a forgery. I believe it is a forgery. And if I ever go out on the stage and I do this as a presentation, it'd be interesting to see what my audience has got to say. But anyway, if you anything else you want to say, Goff?
No, that's you're right. I agree with you there, and yeah, it's good. It's quite interesting. Yeah.
Thank you. And next week we will be doing something a lot easier, and we'll be looking at Craswell Crags. I probably might toe more the line on that one. Henry, anything you'd like to say?
Well, it's clear there's a lot of people with a lot of fingers in the pie. Characters appearing, disappearing, coming and going.
Yes.
There seems to be a lot of caves being investigated, but none of it being reported. No one's bothered to actually do any drawings or list any artifacts. Things disappear, things appear. It's more like a magic show.
Yeah, things do appear and disappear, and it is very much like a magic skull. I'd love to know where that mammoth skull went.
I'd imagine it was on loan from someone.
Do you know that would be rather interesting? You don't get many mammoth skulls about, but on loan from someone. That sounds pretty good. Yes, on loan from someone. Anything else you want to say, my friend Henry?
No. Well, I think excellent. As I say, the internet or the various web pages seem to be convincing everyone it's a true and justified story, but obviously it needs a little bit more unraveling.
Yeah, so when you unravel it, it does smell a bit. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, using Goff's words. Anyway, thanks for that, you two.
Right.
Okay.
So are we seeing both Goff and Henry next week?
I hope so.
Okay,
Yes.
I'll see you two then.
Yes.
Thank you very much for joining
Okay.
us.
Bye-bye.
Okay, you two. Bye. Bye-bye, Henry and Goff. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Going to put a big bag of gravel on the garden furniture now, so it doesn't blow away.
All right, now maybe the gravel might blow away.
Well, I've just had a text saying that they've closed all the schools in Newport tomorrow because there's a red alert now.
Oh God! Right. Okay. Right,
you better start tying things down.
Yeah, the caravan is tied down, and yeah. That's why I built solid buildings here instead of loads of little portable things.
Right, look after yourself.
Angie, I'll speak to you soon.
Bye.
Henry, I'll speak to you then. Bye-bye, Henry. Bye. Bye-bye. 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 Bye. We've got a storm coming. And anyway, I'm just going to read the chat again. Oh, the chat's gone. There's nothing in the chat there. Anyway, thanks for watching. This is my second one about Paviland Cave. Obviously, a little bit more out there today. And thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join. Getting that join button. Thank you very much. And yeah, it's a lot to take on board, isn't it? Anyway, thank you.